speech. So first of all, thank you everyone, both the competitors and the judges, and also the volunteers, the official moderators that came to help us out. Really appreciate it. It was a beautiful Saturday, and everyone wasted it on a day like today to hear a bunch of people talk. So we really appreciate it. It's the third time doing it, and hopefully there'll be a lot more to come. So I'm just going to start with the introductions. We didn't do that in the morning because we were tight on time. So we'll start with a little bit of introductions, and then we have a speech from one of our sponsors, and then there'll be Ms. Jordana, who will also give her keynote, the main event. At the end, it'll be everyone that advances. So we'll start with myself. My name is Monas. I'm the CEO for Lions Cup. I've been here since, I guess, the start for the third year in a row now. And then we have three co-founders. There's Jasmine, there's Fallon, and there's Jen. Jen is the short, very loud one. Jasmine is the one here. And Fallon is here somewhere as well. I'm sure everyone knows who Fallon is. So I'll let the co-founders do the introductions next, and then I'll go on to the rest of the steering committee. So Jasmine, if you want to go.
For sure. It'll just be very quick. So I know some of you did see me in your rounds. My name is Jasmine. So I am one of the three co-founders. I'm very happy that we were able to do the Moot virtually this year and continue for a third year. Thank you so much for dedicating your weekend to come out and competing. And I hope that everyone had a great time and got some more mooting experience. And thank you.
Thank you. And Fallon, if you want to jump in.
Hi. I've been directing Moots since give or take 2013. I've never had more fun and been more relaxed and actually gotten to see more than one round of Moot. Thank you, all of you, for indulging in this this exercise. It's tremendously special because we love the law, and our entire profession has been thrown into this really interesting set of circumstances. And it looks like the way forward for the next little while is going to be this. I think it's so important that we try to live what we do. If this is what court's going to be like, well, we may as well train our students now and get used to this new idea here where it's safe. I don't have any more comments to make other than thank you very much.
Thank you, Fallon. Jen is not on this call as of yet. She's still working on some admin stuff. So we'll just take it away with the other steering committee members. So we have Summer. If you want to give a really brief introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Summer. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the Lions Cup, and I'm also the co-president for the Moot Law Society at York. Glad everyone's here and could make it.
Quick and brief, I like that. Vince would have been next, but he's actually not on this call either. He's working on some admin stuff with Jen. They'll join a little later. So we'll have Naomi.
Hi everyone, my name is Naomi. I am one of the Chief Logistics Officers for the steering committee, and I'm also the Vice President Moot Court at Moot Law Society at York. And all I have to say is that I'm really happy with how this online moot has turned out, and I can't wait to see what's in store for the mooting community in the future.
Thank you. And then we have Tombra.
Hi everyone, my name is Tombra. I'm one of the chief logistics or the other chief logistics officer, and I'm very grateful for this competition as well. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. And lastly, but not least, is Zipporah.
Hey guys, I'm Zipporah. I'm the Chief Informations Officer. This was actually my first time viewing a Moot, and I gotta say, the people in my room did a phenomenal job. I was really proud of you guys. You guys are so brave.
Thank you. So normally I would be a little more entertaining. I'll make some jokes, but I can't judge the room, and you can't read the room here, so I don't know if anyone's laughing or booing me. So I'll just kind of mull over that part and pretend everyone is laughing at home or smiling or not throwing like tomatoes at me somewhere. Funny enough, we were actually really close to completely canceling this Moot because we weren't gonna do it in person. We wanted to do it in person. It didn't look like it was gonna happen. So the main idea, thank you, Monica, always laughing with me or at me, and Anish. So yeah, so we wanted to cancel it because we didn't know what. We didn't know if we want to cancel it or maybe postpone it a little later in the year. Justice Morana and Justice Campos, my apologies, Your Honors. That's my fault. They did teach me better. I should have addressed them properly. I stopped Moot like 2 years ago, and I've just been running it here with the co-founders and the rest of the steering committee ever since, and it's been great. And I think the way technology is going and the way society changes everything, it does go towards more of a technology basis. And like Fallon said, you know what, if one day court does become virtual, might as well get used to it now because it's clearly not off the table. So, you know, I don't know what will happen next year, but I do know this year was a success. There were a lot of smaller hiccups, but those will all be ironed out. And maybe next year, if we go virtual again, it'll be an even better experience. Or if we go back to physical moots, I do know one thing, these virtual moots will not be crossed off the list forever. They will make a comeback eventually. And you know what? I've actually noticed from a lot of competitors, I've heard some feedback that they actually like this more than the physical moots. I don't know what the general consensus is for that, but I don't know. We'll see. We might send out like a survey at the end just to see how all the competitors and judges react to that. So you want to start with Adam Goodman, who's an incredible criminal lawyer, also one of our sponsors, very, very generous sponsor. Helped us out last minute, and we want to give him the floor to speak for a little bit and introduce himself. And you have about like maybe 15-20 minutes, have a little chat.
So when I discussed with Jen sponsoring this event, I spoke to her about sponsoring. She went through the packages, and her response was, "Okay, we'll put your logo here, and you get to speak for 15 minutes." So had I known that prior to offering to sponsor, I might have thought twice about it. I'm not going to be 15 minutes. I have some notes that I've jotted down here that is really all that I'm going to say. But this was really my first court experience done online. I've done some bail court by phone. I did a academic hearing the other day by Zoom, but this was my first time really dealing with this type of advocacy. And I was learning as everybody else was learning. A few examples. In my last moot, all of the mooters stood up to address me. And I didn't know if that was right or wrong, because frankly, I don't think anybody knows if that's right or wrong, because we haven't figured out what the standards are. What's the dress code for an online moot? Some people were wearing full suits. I was just wearing a shirt and a collar. If we were going to York for this moot, I probably would have put on a full suit. I probably would have, I mean, traffic wouldn't have been that bad today, but it would have been a much different experience. This was unique. You roll out of bed, you judge a few moots, you have your own place to go watch TV during the breaks, and it's kind of nice, but we do lose some of the experience that we get from actual advocacy. And I'll give you an example. This is actually a very famous example. I think now Justice Sawson, who was a former dean of Osgoode, he wasn't my dean, I'm a little older than that, but he spoke in one sense about this whole idea of watch the judge's pen. And the notion being, you want to see what the judge is doing with their pen. If they slam it down, they're probably annoyed with something you said. But if they're furiously writing, stop talking, because they're interested in what you're saying. You want to get it down. But nobody had any way to watch my pen today. Similarly, eye contact. Is anybody making eye contact with me right now? I don't know. I'm staring at my camera, but my camera happens to be above my computer. I got another camera here that I don't use. Do I put the camera on? And does it affect how I do eye contact? And does it affect how I do? A lot of my Zoom world has been sitting here in my small Midtown condo, and this has been what people see. Those are all my Blue Jays bobbleheads behind me. Is it appropriate for me to bring my Blue Jays bobbleheads into a courtroom? Probably not, but some judges, frankly, might find it very entertaining and a nice topic of conversation that a judge might enjoy. So this is a very different experience. I hope it's not the reality, because it's not great advocacy, but I could see it working in certain cases. It might not work for examining a witness, but instead of me getting up and driving somewhere far to deal with a case, Monis, I'm just staring at your head, and it's I guess that's how it's set up. So I think it could be advantages in some ways, and we're going to see the criminal justice system move very quickly, because when COVID first started, when COVID first came out, the criminal justice system wasn't ready. We're still running around these pieces of paper that we call informations. We're running them around a courthouse. There's no electronic system for these informations. The criminal justice system is probably decades behind. Up until a few years ago, we were still sending faxes. And in many cases, we probably still do. Some places have moved on to this very new technology that we call email. So I think the criminal justice system is probably 2 decades behind, and they've been forced to adapt very quickly over the past several weeks. They're still not there. We're using phones and instead of online technology, but it forced the system to adapt, and we could see some very good things from that. Just a little bit about me. I graduated from Osgoode in 2007. I didn't get one of those big Bay Street jobs that everybody probably wants that paid $13 a week as a student, certainly more than I'm making now in the middle of COVID. And I went and started my own practice, and I'm certainly not making not as much money yet as some of my colleagues, but sometimes I run into them at the Eaton Center and talk about how I've done tons of trials, and they're like, I've never gone to court. I'm a little jealous of you, as they go work late into the night at one of their big firms. And what's important to know is that later on in your career, none of that shit matters. Nobody cares where you went to law school. Nobody cares where you started working. It matters as a student for whatever reason. Everybody cares about the prestige of your undergrad and this and that. It never comes up once you start practicing. Nobody makes fun of this school and likes this school better. We find other things to make fun of everybody for. The school thing doesn't really matter. So immediately started my own criminal law practice, aglaw.ca. I do mostly criminal law. I do some administrative law. I've formed a little niche practice helping students who find themselves get in trouble for academic disputes. Those are some of my best stories. I think my best one is, I had one student once fake their York graduation to the point where they walked across the stage, had their name read, and lied to their whole family, made fake tickets. And then when they didn't get the diploma, everybody started asking questions. They came to see me, and I'm like, the evidence here is horrible against you. And the family figured it out. One other student put all of his notes in a bathroom stall on sticky notes. And he claims that he used to study from sticky notes, like flashcards. So in the middle of the exam, he has to go to the washroom. They figure out these cards were him. What does he tell them? Well, he had to go take a number 2 right before the exam, and he put them all up there so he could study, and he just left them there. Sometimes better stories than your drug addict criminal file, but I'm sure Jordana has criminal stories that she'll share with you. So that's another niche practice that I do. I also run a bit of a travel company. I run criminal law CPDs in Las Vegas. You can check us out at destinationcpd.com. We'd love to have students come join us. We weren't able to do it this year. We had to shift online and do a Zoom CPD, but that was a really cool project that I took over from an American gentleman who since passed away when he got sick, and we created this Canadian conference, and that's destinationcpd.com. Just a few final comments. In oral advocacy, the judges probably made up their mind 90% of the time. So a lot of what you say probably doesn't sway a decision that much, but when it does, that's when you want to be good. As I mentioned, you want to watch the judge. You want to watch what the questions are, because the question shows you what the judge is thinking. It gives you an insight into his or her or their mind. That's important because they're the ones making the decision. They're the ones who have that control over your client. You still might want to say certain things to protect a record, perhaps more so in trial than in appellate advocacy when you'll have already given a written record. And how you engage in the back and forth with the judge, that can be very powerful. And it could almost turn into a conversation. And if you lose your 10 minutes having that conversation and don't get to all of your prepared points, that's totally cool, because it shows that you had this strong, powerful conversation with the person making the decision to talk about what they think is important. And remember, your goal is to win the case. It's not to get all your points out. You got to know your case. You got to know your facts. If you don't, the judge is going to be able to tell. You could be the best advocate there is. If you don't know the facts of your case, it's not going to go well for you. Similarly, if perhaps you're not the best oral speaker, if you know your case, you're going to do a lot better than people who don't. And that brings me to my final point. And we've been hearing this a lot lately in some of the criminal law CPDs because, frankly, we're just looking for stuff to talk about. And that's this notion of imposter syndrome. When you go to a moot, just like when you go to court, whether you're a lawyer or a paralegal, you're going to feel like you don't belong. And you might feel that way the first time you ever do it, or when you're 12 years into practice. You're going to be, holy shit, what am I doing here? Everybody else is smarter than me. Everybody else is better than me. And you have to realize that's not true, and everybody feels the same way. And let me tell you something, so does the judge. I don't think I've ever judged a moot court before. I was nervous too. I was nervous if I was being too rude, asking too difficult questions, if my notes were good enough, if I knew what was going along. Sometimes I couldn't follow your arguments, and that might be my fault. And the judge is going to get nervous too. A judge has the same problems, the same life issues that all of you do. They put their pants on the same way you do. They have all of the same things you do. So one thing that you learn is that you don't put judges on these pedestals because really they're human beings just like everybody else is. And once you get that human factor there, it'll make you a much better advocate. So I think I've probably covered my 8-9 minutes. It's certainly not the 15 to 20, but thank you for the opportunity.
That's okay.
I enjoyed many of the mooters that I heard today. Hope we weren't too hard on you with some of the questions, and hopefully everybody does this again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Really, really appreciate that. Really appreciate you sacrificing your Saturday to judge all of these students. And a lot of these students, it's actually their first moot. So, you know, your words of this nervousness and terror of mooting in front of everyone, it's a reality to them.
Sorry, I forgot one thing. I wanted, if I may, I'm going to see if this will work, because things happen in courts. This is, you might have heard this. This is a Supreme Court, this is the United States Supreme Court hearing. I mean, the biggest kangaroo court there is, but that's just my political opinion that everybody here I expect to agree with. Listen to what happened.
Congressman and change these laws that apply to banks. And what the FCC has said is that when the subject matter of the call ranges to the topics, then the call is transformed, and it's a call to...
Everybody hear the toilet flush? If you didn't hear it, put it into YouTube. Supreme Court toilet flush. That's what happened in the middle of an online Supreme Court hearing a couple months ago. Sorry to interrupt.
Honestly, I'm not even surprised. It seems like that's the norm there. But you know what? Honestly, like we really appreciate it. A lot of these students, thought that, you know, everyone is nervous, even for the judges. All the other students, we're all on the same boat here. You know, even for us that run it, it's very, very nerve-wracking. It's something that we've never done before, and as many years as we do it, it's still, you know, a new situation every single time. So, you know, we're all in this together. We're all doing something new. Experience, Jordana Goldlist, the amazing Jordana Goldlist also is very experienced, and I'm sure has stories that she can tell for hours. But I know she's also on a little bit of a tight schedule, so we'll get you on right now. Jordana, if you want to make a quick introduction, your brilliant keynote, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Monis. I appreciate it. And thank you, Adam, for your words of encouragement to everyone. That was not on my agenda, so I'm glad that someone with some legal experience was able to give people tips that are going to be put to practical use. I want to thank all of the organizers and all this steering committee. I can't even imagine the work that went in to putting this together in a digital format. I think it's really incredible. I'm quite frankly surprised by how few hiccups there were throughout the day, how evenly things flowed. I really think it's amazing. So I want to start off by commending each and every one of you for putting this platform together. Personally, I hope we never have to do it virtually again. And I hope I never have to go into court to do a virtual trial in my life. Because quite frankly, you know, what's missing here is the human element. And for those of you who have never done a moot before or an argument of this style, it's so important to make eye contact. It's so important to feel the energy of your audience. And that's no matter what speaking engagement you are doing. It's really, that connection means so much, and no digital format can capture it. And as flawless as this one has been, I hope that each and every one of you take the opportunity as soon as it presents to do a live in-person moot, because it really is a phenomenal experience. But second to that, I have to say 2020 Lions Cup, you guys did a great job. With that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jordana Goldlist. Like Adam, I'm also a graduate of Osgoode Hall Law School, class of 2007. I was called to the bar in 2008, which means I've been practicing for 12 years. The first 2 of those years were spent writing angry letters as a civil litigator. I lost interest in that very quickly, and in 2010, I decided to make the foray into the world of criminal defense. I started off with a large firm. We started off actually as a small firm of 4, and by the time I left the firm 5 years later, we were 30 associates, 4 students, 2 administrative staff. So we took the firm from what was sort of a small niche market into this massive warehouse that I didn't like for my clients. And, you know, as much as I prefer the human element for these sort of talks, that's also what I preferred for my own practice and my own clients. I needed to get to know them throughout the entire stage of the proceeding and not just jump in at the end to do their trials. I found it very impersonal. And it's the personal side of criminal law that I relish. It's what drives me away from doing any of the Bay Street stuff or working in, you know, a huge corporate environment. I work with my clients one-on-one, and it's often, you know, 1.5 to 2.5, maybe 3 years before their case is complete. Perhaps because of the nature of the work I do. So my focus is on what's called high-risk criminal litigation, most of my clients are charged with firearms offenses, drug trafficking, or murder. So I do more of the complex cases, bigger cases, and that's really what I've grown and cultivated for myself over the last 10 years. I now operate my own firm called JHG Criminal Law. I'm situated in downtown Toronto, but I take cases all over Southern Ontario. I'm opening up a satellite office in Hamilton. It was derailed for a minute because of COVID, but by the end of the year, I will have a second office in Hamilton, and I'm actually working on another satellite office in Salerno, Italy. So I've really expanded over the course of the last 12 years. In addition to the work that I do as a lawyer, I think it's really important to also have a connection to the greater community. And so with that, I'm a mentor for university students. I also mentor street kids in transition through Covenant House. I attended various law schools to participate on panels or discussion groups about lawyer life, whatever that means. I hear it's more than a hashtag, and I try to help people through that. And I'm also a regular contributor to the legal publication Lawyers Daily, as well as I often contribute to CBC by commentating on various legal issues of the day, both on air as well as in written format. I list all these things just to show that there can be a really full life after law school and after you navigate through the legal profession. But I'm coming from a very different place than most lawyers, or at least the perception of what most lawyers are and have been. And that's a really important discussion I want to focus on today. See, my history includes me as a former street kid that was actually expelled from the York Region Board of Education at the age of 16. I was walked out of my high school in handcuffs after being arrested for selling marijuana on school property. I spent the next 4 days in solitary confinement at Vanier Corrections. And the truth is, I was just selling weed so that I could afford a place to sleep at night. I was a drug addict that kept getting kicked out of my parents' house, and the only place I had left to stay was a friend's couch where her dad was charging me $10 a night. And the only way I could make $10 during the day and still go to school was to sell dope at school. But nobody asked me that while I was going through the system. Nobody really cared about the why. And it was interesting when I watched the Moots today, and some people guessed at why KGM was involved in this violent assault and what may have gone into his sentencing hearing. I can tell you that nobody asked me why. The lawyer that I hired through legal aid just told me when to plead guilty. And because it was my second time pleading guilty to drug-related offenses in a 6-month period, I was giving up my right to a trial without even knowing that I had the right to a trial. And in fact, what I did was get a conditional discharge that put me on probation for 18 months. And my probation officer watched me go from a straight A high school student who's sort of back and forth in and out of various homes, essentially crowd surfing, but doing what I could to keep, life together. By the time I finished my last appointment with the probation officer, I was a full-blown homeless high school dropout. And during that time, at no point was there any real intervention. Now, I don't blame her personally. I blame the system. We have a system that is designed to let people like myself and people like KGM and youth who are in a position of vulnerability fall through the cracks without interruption. And so my focus on the speech today is this, because as the future of the legal profession, that is you, all of you in some fashion, you have the opportunity to change this. And I think that when you enter the system and enter law school with eyes wide open to what is really happening, then you have the opportunity to make those changes at the outset. I would bet good money that KJM, who we've now all been studying, I don't know how long you guys have been living with the decision to prepare for today, but certainly for a while, I would bet you he did not begin his journey into the criminal justice system by stabbing another kid in the face. I would bet that he was sentenced to probation, we know that, and I would bet you he breached his probation. And I would bet that he was rearrested for breaching the probation and that the cycle for him continued to spin. And if that didn't happen, I would be amazed, because I can tell you that it's often the case that you have youth involved in the criminal justice system who are sentenced to probation as a starting point for them, who then breach their probation and are charged with breaching their probation, who are then further sentenced for breaching the probation, and oftentimes are given more probation that they're going to breach. This is the cycle of the youth criminal justice system. And I'm not blaming probation. I want to be clear here. I'm not suggesting that probation officers don't come into the system wanting to help. But what we have is a system that is overburdened, overworked, underpaid, and poorly resourced. And the result of this, of course, is the cycle. And unfortunately, there are not enough lawyers that are like KJM's lawyers, who fought every step of the way to get justice for this 15-year-old kid. There are too many lawyers who were like my lawyer, saying, just plead guilty and we'll get you some probation. It really was just my own insights that had me following my probation officer, because quite frankly, the 4 days I spent in solitary confinement were enough to suggest to me I'll do whatever it takes to not come back here. And so when my probation officer made it quite clear she would not hesitate to send me back to jail if I breached, I just didn't breach. And I know that if there was early intervention for KJM, that we would probably not be reading about him having stabbed someone at 15 years old. But everyone around him failed. And that's because the system, as it's currently designed, is working. I can tell you firsthand that there are a lot of intelligent, compassionate, creative, innovative youth that are stuck in this cycle. And it's not because they are bad or evil, right? Most youth who enter the system are coming from situations of impoverished communities where gang culture permeates and carrying guns and selling drugs is cool. Or you have youth with underlying health issues that aren't being addressed. Addiction is a major contributing factor of criminality. And these are not, individual categories that are mutually exclusive. Oftentimes there's overlap between them. And so if we don't interrupt the cycle early on, then we can't expect different from the people who enter it. So the end result is a criminal record. And what that does is it tells the world that this individual is a bad individual. Maybe evil, maybe violent, maybe mean, for sure someone who can't be trusted. And that's the biggest problem we have with people trying to exit the system. We speak about recidivism and how to interrupt recidivism, but how are we supposed to allow anyone to live a different life if they have a criminal record that acts as a character reference? To think about that. You also have a situation where a youth believes everything that the criminal record says about him or her, and they don't think they're any different. They don't try to do different. And so it's a cycle that just keeps spinning. I often have people ask me why they should care. It's one of the biggest questions I have. Why should I care about the criminals you represent? Why do I care when they put themselves back to jail? It's their own actions that result in them being in jail. Why should my tax dollars go to help them? For those people, my answer is really simple. I asked them, would you like to be the victim of a shooting or a robbery or a home invasion? And of course, they say no one wants to be victimized. And then I explain, if you don't want to be a victim, you need to help give people the opportunity to do something other than victimize others. Right? Those in the criminal justice system can only do so much. Defense lawyers can fight charges, crown attorneys can offer diversion, judges can show restraint, probation officers can encourage counseling. But if we don't have early intervention, job training, employment opportunities, internship, counseling, and after-school programs, then all of that surface stuff means nothing. And if we don't have a recognition in the greater society that a criminal record is not a character reference, then people have no other option but to continue their cycle of crime. A criminal record is like a resume. It's a snapshot of what someone is doing or has done at a particular time of their life. It cannot possibly be the end of our determination of who they are as a person. The criminal record tells us that someone did something at a particular time without telling us why. And without that why, we can't possibly put into context who this person is. Adam touched on that in his comments when he said that judges are just people. And we're all just people. Our titles do not determine who we are as people. In 2018, I gave a TEDx talk called Who Judges the Judge? And as much as you might like that phrase, you can't steal it, I trademarked it. And it's an important sentiment about society. It's not meant to be taken literal in any way. And it's certainly not meant to demean the role of judges because we need them in our system. But it's meant to call into question the way that we show respect to the people around us and how we consider other people in our lives. Do we consider who they are as people? Are we going to treat a criminal record as necessarily writing someone off, as often happens when they go to apply for a job or a volunteer position or try to travel? Think about it. I mean, as much as selling drugs is harmful to society, what if that's the only way to pay for shelter for that particular day? I questioned in my TEDx talk why we judge people by the worst decisions they made on the worst day of their life. Take a minute and think about what that might look like to you. What if instead of the future you have ahead of you, you were forever judged by the worst decision you made on the worst day of your life? Because oftentimes that can be what a criminal record is for some people. And so I want to thank you for listening and hopefully taking something from this, because from what I understand, I'm talking to the next generation of lawyers and leaders who can really affect change in society and in the system as a whole. So I thank you, and I wish everyone good luck tomorrow. You did a great job today, and I look forward to hearing and judging everyone on their moots tomorrow. Thank you.
Jordana, thank you so much for that. That was amazing. And you know what, honestly, it felt too short for what it was, even though it was like 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. But honestly, it was so quick. And there's something that you brought up that I thought was really important. And that was the fact that how important human connection is and why you don't like virtual moots. And it's definitely something that should be questioned, because there's something that really makes, you know, people, and that's the fact that we have human connections. And, you know, AIs and computers can do everything that we can, except the fact that we can differ through, you know, human connection. And I know for everyone here, there was so many emotional parts of that keynote, and it brought out so many things that a lot of people just failed to address or failed to mention. And that why component that people fail to even consider when it comes to, you know, judging a person or someone's future. And there's a lot that happens there. I don't know how much time you have left. I want to open up a little bit for maybe a Q&A, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried to keep it short and sweet. I knew that we were opening it up for some questions, so I do have time for that.
Beautiful. So I'm going to ask that everyone that's in the audience, please do not unmute yourself. Just type out your questions through the chat, and we'll address it that way. So Jordan, either you can read through it yourself, or I can read you the questions, whatever you prefer. Everyone can just write it through there, and then we'll address all the questions there.
I haven't been keeping the chat on, so why don't I don't know if you've been reviewing them, but if you want to ask, I'm happy answer, or if other people want to chime in and ask their questions, that probably works better than me reading them.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually already have like a whole bank of questions that people want to ask. One of them is, you mentioned a mentor program for undergraduate students. Can you speak a little more about that?
There's a mentor program that Ryerson University runs out of Toronto, so I'm a mentor with that program. I'm also contacted, I'd say weekly, through LinkedIn and most often through Instagram, just by students wanting some advice. So I'm always open to that, and always open to help meeting with people just to help them through the process. So both formally through Ryerson and informally just on my own.
So guys, let the questions come into the comment section. What is the name of the program at Ryerson that you're affiliated with?
It's just their mentor program. It's called their mentor program. If you go on my LinkedIn account, you'll see all the information. There's a link to the Ryerson University mentorship program. So it's open to everyone. It's not specific to their law school. It's just a general undergrad mentorship program that connects undergraduate students to professionals in the various firms, the various positions.
The next question is probably a little difficult to address. The comment is amazing, Keynote. Thank you so much for your words. My question is, what does it take to be a great criminal lawyer?
Oh, asking difficult questions. You do. You have to leave your ego to the side permanently. I think that one of the biggest impediments to good lawyering is lawyers who are afraid to lose. You have to have a unique, creative approach. Sometimes you have to take risks. You know, you're asking difficult questions of, for example, you are challenging the evidence of police officers. You have to be prepared, you know, for that challenge of suggesting they're racist, suggesting they didn't find evidence where they claim to. You're challenging the charter rights of people who are generally not the subject of a lot of education on their own charter rights. You know, a lot of times I'm representing people who are coming from impoverished communities that have never had anyone fight for them before. And so you have to be prepared to not be a social worker. You're not there to fix someone's entire life. You're there to fight the case. And hopefully along the way, that opens up the door for them to want to do better for themselves. That's really what I see the job as being. Preparation is key. If you just want like the nuts and bolts of how to be a good criminal lawyer, you're reading a lot, you're going through the disclosure, you're being careful, you're crafting questions in advance, you are guessing what your opponent is going to say in order to create an argument about why they are wrong, which is at all times what you're trying to do. And it's just it's a matter of tenacity. You just have to keep fighting, right? That's sort of the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I personally picked up from the keynote was the fact that your motivation, your desires for your career are genuine. They're not based off, you know, materialistic things like money or fame. They're genuine. I think that's what makes you really successful.
Oh, don't kid yourself.
We have in other.
I went to law school so I could drive a Porsche.
Another comment here is, thank you, Jordana, for your inspirational words. I was wondering how you approach writing a factum, particularly for challenging cases that deal with serious offenses.
How I write a factum? Right now, I email my associate and tell her I need her to write a factum for whatever legal issue I have. I see Adam Goodman just said hire an articling student. So yes, we hire people to help with that work. But I sit down and I guess I write a factum the same way I write a closing to a jury, right? I work backwards. What is it that I want the judge or the jury to decide? And then I have to work through the law that will prove what I want to have happen. And then I collect all the pieces of evidence that I think supports the law as I want it interpreted in my favor. And so that's sort of how I work. I always work backwards from the premise of what I want to have happen, whatever decision I want the judge to make. So, you know, in KJM, if I wanted the judge to rule, that, you know, I needed the stay of proceedings and the ceiling should be moved to 15 months instead of the 18-month cap, I would break down the points of law that I would need to argue in order to achieve that. And then I would collect all of the points in favor of the opposing argument and know what I could say to challenge each of those. I think you're muted. There we go.
Thank you so much. There we go. Okay. We have another question here is, how would you describe your experience at Osgoode?
I really struggled in school, in law school especially, but it was a challenging time of my life. So I spent all of my teenage years on the street. I went to rehab at 19. I went back to high school at 20 years old. I didn't graduate high school until I was 21. I didn't start at Osgoode until I was 25. And quite frankly, I was just leaving sort of drug subculture and a criminal lifestyle behind in my first semester of law school. I held on to that life for a long time. And so I really kept to myself in law school, more for personal reasons than anything. I didn't want anyone to know who I was, what I was about. I didn't want anyone to know my history. I just wanted to go to class and pass class and go be a lawyer. So I saw law school for me as a means to an end to have, you know, a better life. And quite frankly, everyone around me thought I was going to fail. Most of my friends thought that it was silly for me to even try law school, that I would never cut it as a lawyer. Why are you bothering? And so I didn't want to get connected to any of the people around me because I, quite frankly, didn't think I would be around very long. So law school for me was something to just get through. And it's unfortunate, it's the opposite advice of what I give people now who are getting into law school. You know, I see the value of the connections people have, even in court. You know, I see some of my colleagues walk into court and they, you know, oh, hey, I haven't seen you since school. And there's a camaraderie there. And I didn't really participate in that. I didn't participate in any extracurricular activities. I didn't join any associations. I didn't do Moot court. I didn't do anything. And I think all of that was to my detriment, quite frankly. And I didn't understand the push to do these things until I became a lawyer, and probably a few years into my career when I appreciated the networking opportunity that I had missed. So my law school experience was unique to my life experience. And, you know, it sort of forms the basis of my advice to others, which is don't do what I did. You know, if you can join things that interest you, clubs, associations, connect with other people, you know, make friends, keep in touch with people, like that's what I recommend people do.
Thank you so much for that. So someone does actually have another question. So Mona's just exited for a brief moment earlier, so I will just ask the next one. So particularly, the individual's wondering, when you had decided that you wanted to pursue law school, for example, were there any organizations at your time or programs or individuals that helped you get along that path so that you could course correct? I know you said you went to high school later on again. So I think they're just wondering any particular organizations that helped you along the way that you could think of that would benefit others as well.
I didn't really have organizations. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was a kid. So like being a lawyer was my dream when I was like 7 or 8 and didn't understand what being a lawyer even meant. I just thought it was like cool and there was a status and power that I attached to being a lawyer. I didn't really understand for myself. And then, of course, teenage years, I thought there's no way, I'm not doing this. I've sort of closed that door by virtue of my own behavior. And then I got through undergrad, and I took a master's in philosophy. I loved it, but I knew there was no money in being a philosopher in the early 2000s. And so I really threw an application out to law school because I just didn't know what else I could possibly do. I knew I liked to argue. I knew I loved the law. But I had spent, almost 10 years now as a criminal and couldn't see my way through that. I didn't really know how the shift would be. So I didn't have organizations or support behind me. Certainly every university has that support. And again, like my comments similar to law school, I think it is really important to develop those networks early on. Certainly whatever associations you join or networks you build cannot harm you. So there's certainly nothing to deter you away from that.
Thank you. And the next question we have on here is that you spoke a great deal on the cycle of recidivism that impacts our communities. A big element would, of course, be what we define as criminality. Given the discussions on this topic that have recently become prevalent, do you have any thoughts on what changes can or should be made to what we criminalize within Canada?
So I think that we have to change the way that we look at criminal records and the way that criminal records follow people. I think it's really unfortunate that we changed the Youth Criminal Justice Act to no longer have a period where they're granted a pardon immediately after. I think it used to be 3 years without any further convictions, and now we have criminal records that are following youth into adulthood. I think we need to certainly spend a lot of time and money on social programs. We're all reading about this movement to defund the police. I think it's unfortunately named. I think that the premise behind defund the police is actually about a reallocation of funds and a reallocation of responsibilities. I don't think the police should ever be tasked with dealing with someone who is experiencing a mental health breakdown or an overdose. I think that we need to leave the care of people who suffer from addictions and mental health issues to the professionals that are trained to talk someone down from those issues or help someone through, a drug overdose, for example. I don't know why the police are there to arrest someone who's just almost died. Quite frankly, it's just adding insult to injury and wasting a lot of taxpayers' money and bringing this person to jail when, quite frankly, they just need some medical attention, some counseling, and some help. I think we need to do a better job of addressing poverty, not by pouring the money into, free housing and government-sponsored food programs. I think that is, a Band-Aid solution. I think we need real job opportunities for people. We need to help grant people the ability to do for themselves. And we're missing that. We're missing a whole segment of, rehabilitation and reintegration that we talk about in the system, but doesn't actually exist. So guys coming out of prison and that are placed on parole, contrary to what most people think, they're actually not given job training, skills training. They're not properly set up for work programs. They're just monitored, right? Parole is really just a system of monitoring, waiting for the person to breach their impossible parole conditions to be sent back to jail. And by impossible parole conditions, I mean, I got guys that have served 5, 6, 8 years in jail. They come out and one of their conditions is no alcohol. So you can't even have a beer and a burger after spending 8 years in custody without threat of going back to jail. Like, this is what we're doing to people. Instead of saying, hey, are you good with your hands? I'm going to teach you how to be an electrician so you can actually make money so you can stop robbing people, right? Like, that's the cycle. We need to give people viable alternatives, because if all we're doing really is just creating a system of catch, release to catch again, then we all lose out, because it's taxpayer money again that's going to fund this system instead of help turning people into living pro-social lives where they can contribute back to society. So we don't actually have a system that wants people to leave, right? Because without criminals in the system, you have no system. So that's the cycle that we really need to interrupt. We need to help give people viable options and opportunities to do different.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. We probably just have one more question before I conclude. It was regarding what Adam brought up a little earlier about the imposter syndrome. You know, coming from a very unique background, how would you say what the reality of imposter syndrome is in the legal world, as well as what type of criticism you receive?
I haven't received criticism to my face. I'm sure there's plenty behind my back. But I don't really care, right? I promised myself in law school, when I listened to everyone else talk from mostly positions of, elitists, quite frankly, nobody was really speaking out as being from an impoverished community or a situation of coming from addictions. It wasn't discussed. And quite frankly, I'm not really surprised, right? I was surrounded by what felt like, and again, maybe that was my perception and my own sort of insecurities that I was bringing into the classroom. But the reality felt like I was surrounded by private school educated kids who grew up thinking and knowing about the law and things that I had no access to. I just spoke about everyone feeling like an imposter. And I think that it's true in the sense of, I think a lot of people have their own insecurities. If not everyone has their own insecurities in different situations. So I do think that's true. Me personally, of course I felt like an imposter. And then I just stopped caring. I just knew that I was doing good work. I was making really good money. I really have. I've made sure to position myself in such a way that I don't care what anyone else says anymore. I used to be so worried. When I started my career, I had a tattoo that started at the top of my shoulder and ended a few inches above my elbow. And I was so paranoid for anyone to know that I was tattooed. Like, I wouldn't even wear a t-shirt to law school or anywhere that was remotely professional because I didn't want to have that, stigma of being someone that's tattooed. That tattoo now goes down to my pinky, and I don't give a shit because I know that I'm doing good work and I make enough money that I'm very much comfortable, and my colleagues taking issue with whatever. It doesn't matter. For me, my biggest fear in being honest about the life that I used to live was that my clients were going to feel like I couldn't represent them in court. My biggest fear was that my clients weren't going to trust me anymore with literally their lives, since most of my practice is defending people charged with murder. And that didn't happen. And the more outspoken and the more real I became, the more my clients appreciated me and stood behind me and thanked me for showing them that they could do different. For some of them. For others, it was just them now understanding why I never talked down to them. I never thought I was better than anyone I've represented, because quite frankly, a few wrong decisions for myself and I'd be back there. And I know that. I don't think I've represented many people who haven't put themselves in a position that I could fathom myself being in had I not made the decision to leave that lifestyle behind. And so I treat all of my clients with a mutual respect, knowing that as a person, they're not much different than me. The only difference between us is the choices that we've made in living our lives differently. And oftentimes that's a matter of circumstance. Oftentimes that's because nobody else told them they could do different. They didn't try going to school. They didn't realize that they were capable of making different choices. And that's the cycle I'm trying to interrupt by changing the way we think about people who enter the system, right? If we recognize that they have the capabilities and the potential to do something different, which everyone has, then we give them a different perspective on the way they live, because it's fully their choice. But we as a system have to do a better job of providing those opportunities to people once they recognize it. And that's really where I hope the change comes in.
Jordana, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. And
for
again, I want to
every
congratulate
question that cut it there. Yeah, and I know that they all appreciate the best of luck that they'll receive. And they all work really hard. I'm sure you can see there's a lot of progression between the first round to the last round for all the competitors, and it'll only get better from. So I know you have to go soon. I'll take you off the spotlight. And at the same time, we also do have Jen, the third and co-founder, the little angry one I was talking about. She can make her little introduction, and then we'll go on there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Have a good night, everybody.
Jordana, thank you so much. I clocked in for the last minute, and I'm so heartbroken I missed that, but fortunately it was recorded, so I get to listen to that. And I mean, for anyone who knows, I fangirl so hard when it comes to Jordana Goldlist. I fangirl so hard. I think she's such an inspiration to me and my own upbringing. For those who know me, understand that like I've gone through the system. I've understand what that's like, and it's so devastating. And I'm very fortunate. I was very privileged to have educated parents that eventually steer me in the right direction. And a lot of people don't have that. And I just want to say, like, you're a huge inspiration for probably many of us that are in this room today. And thank you so much for contributing all this time and energy to promote what it is to be and a great advocate, and beyond that. And I'm sure many of you who've flipped up in life and got to where they are today, and we're privileged enough not to face serious repercussions. And I just want to can we just all give a huge round of applause to Jordana Goldlist? Thank you so much. I know you do have other events to be at, so